Before we get started with the Sales Integrity Podcast, if you haven't already signed up for our free video email course titled 7 Steps to Master the Game of Complex Technical Selling, then you'll want to do so right away. If you're listening on your phone, then simply text the word SI course to the number 44222 or visit mastercomplexsales.com. Again, text the word SI as in sales integrity, so SI course, which is all one word with no spacing at all, to the number 44222 or visit mastercomplexsales.com. Now, let's get started with the podcast. Hello, sales achievers. Welcome to the Sales Integrity Podcast. I'm Shawn Pickett, founder and CEO of Sales Integrity, a sales coaching services provider, and also the founder of My Coach Site, a coaching enablement software provider. This podcast is all about helping sales professionals, leaders, and organizations with a complex technical B2B sale to increase sales and earn more money, period. Wednesdays are a very special day on the Sales Integrity Podcast because our theme for the day is Wisdom Wednesday. Each Wednesday, I will interview a guest, someone who is a leader in the selling profession who can share their wisdom with all of us through their experience. Some of the guests will be sales-related authors, speakers, trainers, and coaches who serve the sales profession as thought leaders. And some of the guests will be VPs of sales or even sales professionals who are willing to share their sales wisdom with their peers and contemporaries in the marketplace. So get ready to glean some value from today's Wisdom Wednesday interview because it's time to get today's episode rockin' and rollin'. Now let's chat with today's guest, Jim Fortin. Jim, are you ready to share some wisdom with Sales Integrity Nation today?
I'm ready. Let's rock and roll.
Great. Nobody can introduce you better than you, Jim. So given that, say hello to our audience, take a moment to tell us a little bit about yourself, and let us know how you best serve the sales profession as a leader in your current role.
Okay, awesome. Obviously, my name is Jim Fortin. What I do is I teach what's called NeuroPersuasion, which is brain persuasion. In layman's terms, I teach subconscious persuasion and influence. What I teach is scientifically based. As a matter of fact, the Max Planck Institute in Leipzig, Germany, back in 2008, discovered through doing neuro research that our brain makes our decisions for us, even if we don't know it, and even while we think we're making our decisions. So I've taught this all around the world, all the way from Wall Street to Main Street. I work heavily in the traditional selling industry, real estate, mortgage, insurance, people that are in corporate sales, etc. Lastly here, how I serve people is I teach people how to become significantly more, rather I say subconsciously, persuasive and influential, and I teach people how to actually get in their own brains and perform at a much higher level. In a nutshell.
That's great. Thanks for bringing that up. And I'm really excited to have Jim on the show. For our audience, I met Jim back in 2009. We were introduced by a mutual acquaintance, mutual friend, and I'm glad that we were connected. I had Jim actually speak at an event that I co-hosted. It was titled How to Stimulate Your Sales in a Down Economy. Jim was definitely a hit of that event, as everyone was fascinated by NeuroPersuasion and what it could do for them, specifically within the messaging components and how they're communicating and interacting with their prospects and customers. So I'm really excited about today's interview and having you on here today, Jim.
Thank you. Me too.
Great. Okay, so let's first start with the question that I ask all of my guests. As you know, my company name is Sales Integrity.
Right.
And I named it that for a reason. But integrity, I found over the years, means something different to everyone. So my first question for you, Jim, is how do you define sales integrity, or what it means for a sales professional to demonstrate integrity while selling?
Okay. A long while back, and I do very well at what I do, and working at Fortune 100 and salespeople, et cetera, I've had the good fortune to do well financially. And I remember a client recently telling another client of mine that they just met inadvertently. She said, I know Jim is really honest. And the other person said, well, how do you know that? And she goes, because of what he teaches, if he wasn't, he would be extremely wealthy. So I teach people quite literally how to extract money from other people's pockets or business. I teach people how to get into people's minds to understand how they think subconsciously. because when you know how people think subconsciously, you can then influence what they do. Now, that being said, what I constantly tell my students is this, is always make sure that the person you're working with is a good fit for your product or service, because if you take money out of their pocket, I believe in karma, somewhere else, somebody's going to take money out of your pocket.
Yeah.
So my approach is always this, use what you learn for the highest good of both parties. So to me, that's what sales integrity is actually being of service to those people who actually can benefit and grow from your service, and then telling those people who are not a good fit and cannot use your service that they're not a fit for you. So plain and simple, that's what sales integrity is to me. It's just the old-fashioned integrity as well.
That's great. I really appreciate you walking through that, because it's always good to get the perspective of our guests so our audience understands kind of the mindset and where you start from as you start answering some of these questions today. I recently wrote an article, Jim, about influence, persuasion, and kind of how that affects your sales game, so to speak. And really, one of the things I did state in there was exactly kind of echoing what you said, which is there are no such thing as bad techniques, just people with bad intentions that use techniques improperly, right?
That's exactly the phrase that I use. There's no such thing as an unethical technique, only an unethical user.
Yeah.
And to add to that just a little bit here is that people can use what I teach, and it's been done throughout history, and it's done in politics. What I teach can very much be used to manipulate people. Now, my definition of manipulation is that you use a technique to actually get what you want at the expense of someone else. And I think that's, in my opinion, that's probably not the right way, or not the best way to use this kind of material. But be aware that people actually do that as well.
Yep. And manipulate, people, I believe, have a negative connotation with that word. The way you described it may not be as favorable. You might not want to manipulate people, right? But
at all.
There's three words that I want to bring up here, Jim, and get your take on. Are these positive or are these negative, or could it be both? And those three words are manipulate, influence, and persuade.
Okay. The definition of influence is tactics, strategies, and techniques to lead people to a belief or to an action. Now, when it comes to influence, we always want to be influencing. We always want to be leading people. Shawn, if I go too far off track, bring me back again, but let me give you an example of these and how they're used by major corporations. So let's talk about influence, for example. Apple, they designed their iPad actually having people in functional magnetic resonance imaging machines, fMRI machines. What they did is they watched the blood flow in the brain to when the brain released the most amount of endorphins. And they released their iPad to actually release endorphins in the brain. Doritos, they know how many pounds of pressure, this is all scientifically calculated, how many pounds of pressure that you have to bite down into a Dorito to get that really hearty crunch. I mean, I haven't had a Dorito in 20 years, but you know that crunch, right?
Yep.
Cheetos, they have you lick your fingertips with all the little powdery stuff. Do you know why?
Why?
Licking your fingers releases endorphins in the brain. It feels good. So this is all calculated. So influence is tactics, strategies, or techniques to lead people to a belief or to an action. Actually, that's persuasion. I'm sorry. And then influence is, I've done this a lot of years. It's early in the morning for me. I was up at 3 a.m., so I'm sorry about that. That's persuasion, tactics, strategies, and techniques. And then influence is having power over others, or seemingly having power with zero effort. So when you look at influence, you look at Martin Luther King. He never said, hey guys, I've got a plan for you. I've got a 3-step marketing plan. Let me lay out my plan for you. He never went through any of that. He had the power and the influence over people by simply getting into their hearts and minds. Now, manipulation, only from my perspective, is actually taking something out of someone else's pocket for your own benefit without regard for the other. In my model of reality, consider manipulation, I guess you can call it negative. That's my take on it, but it's going to cost you as well, because if you take something from someone else, it's going to be taken from you. Now, one more thing here, persuasion and influence, we should be doing this all day long. Companies do it through words. Campbell Soup actually changed their label back in 2009, and they they eye track people and watch them looking at labels, and they actually watch blood flow in the brain to see which images would have the biggest impact on people subconsciously. And the reason they did it, the vice president of sales said, the reason we did it, his exact words, is we wanted to make a deeper impact in the mind of the consumer.
Yeah, that is great. So to summarize, manipulate bad, influence and persuasion good.
If you want to make money, influence as persuasion is good,
I think
subtly and ethically.
I think our audience definitely is in the business to make money. They like doing it. They like to help their customers, but obviously, if you're in the sales profession, you deal with sales professionals all the time.
Yeah,
They're very money motivated. Most of them are, right?
yeah,
So,
and some in the wrong way sometimes.
yep,
I'll
yeah,
just
yep.
yeah,
Yeah, and that goes back to really it's about the person and their intentions. Do they mean well and try to help people, or do they mean harm and try to only help themselves?
that's the exact position that I come from. And there's an old book, it's a new book actually, about 5 years ago by a guy named Bob Berg called The Go Giver. I've known Bob for 20 years. I met him years ago when I started becoming a speaker. And you and I mentioned a lady named Virginia Cook when we started this call, who has been a friend of mine, and I've coached her for years ago, and she was my mentor. She built her entire business on 4 things. I know a little off topic, but I'll share this because we're
That's
people.
great. Go ahead. This is great.
We were having lunch one day. She brought me into her company, and I've trained hundreds of her agents. And she built her. Well, she was in real estate for 40 years prior. She was a president of Henry S. Miller. We were having lunch, and I said, "How did you build your company so quickly?" And I thought she was going to say accountants and marketing plans and advertising and project management. No, she sat back, Shawn, and this is what she said. "Oh, that's easy. 4 things: love, care, concern, and giving."
Hmm.
And I've always taken that to heart. I mean, she's the second largest private real estate company in North Texas. NAR, National Association of Realtors, considers her a top 20 U.S. thought leader in real estate. And I watch her demonstrate those 4 things: love, care, concern, and giving every single day. But so many people get caught up in quote unquote business, they forget that we're people first, and it's people who buy.
Yep. People buy from people. Exactly right.
Yep.
Even if it's in the B2B world, and our primary audience for this podcast are B2B tech sales professionals, right? But you got to build those relationships, with the leaders, the executives that you're selling your complex technical product, services, solutions.
Absolutely.
That's great. And I like that. The Go Giver, I think that's a great book. I've read that before as well. And I think you probably turned me on to Bob's work there. I don't know Bob personally, but the book I'm familiar with, and I think it was from you. But love, care, concern,
and giving.
Yeah, those were the 4. That's outstanding. And this is all really about mindset, right? And at Sales Integrity, we have a mindset mantra we repeatedly teach sales professionals that we coach that is the starting point for our sales achievement framework selling system that we had discussed a little bit before we started recording for the podcast, Jim. And that mantra is this: make your sales pop to achieve your goals. And POP is naturally an acronym. It stands for preparation, organization, and productivity. And these we found through our coaching efforts and some research we did across our customers that these are the key habits of all top sales achievers. So given that, Jim, my next 3 questions will address these 3 core competencies, as we call it, to get your take on each one. You ready?
Okay.
All right. Question number 1, how can sales professionals improve the way they prepare for any step in the sales process?
Okay, I'm going to go intangible again. And for those of you listening, Shawn's very technical, and this is technical sales. I'm right brain dominant, which means I'm all over the place. So I'll focus myself and bring myself back down again. So how can people prepare? For me, that goes back mental. And if I go too far right or left, reel me back in. When I mean right or left, too far off the trail, is that, Shawn, most people, even in sales, I've coached for a lot of years, and I'll say, "What do you want?" And people will say, "Well, I don't want to be in a situation where I can't pay my bills." And I will say, "That's not what I ask you. What I ask you is, what do you want?" So to prepare, in my model of reality, is we have to know what we want, and most people don't know what they want. Most people go through life kind of bumbling and fumbling around, never laser focusing on exactly what they want their outcomes to be. And unless you know what you want your outcomes to be, you don't know how you're choosing. And if you don't know how you're choosing, you don't know how to prepare. So let me take that back to something that's maybe a 30,000-foot answer. But what do you want the outcomes in your business to be? Very specifically, because if you don't know that, it's hard to prepare. And that's why I said you don't know how you're choosing.
That's great. So you got to know what you want, which means know your outcomes, and then know how you're choosing. So you know what outcomes you're choosing, and then that's going to help you prepare.
Yeah, and let me give you an example of choosing, a 30,000-foot example. But if, let's say, for example, your outcome as a selling professional is to make $1 million a year. And then I said, you don't know how you're choosing. If you don't know what you're committed to as well, then you don't know what you're choosing. So somebody says, hey, Shawn, let's go play golf. Well, it's raining today. We're not playing golf anywhere.
Yeah.
But if somebody says, hey, it's sunny, man, let's go play golf today. If you don't know what your outcome is and you don't know what you're committed to, you may say, okay, let's go play golf, because you don't know how you're choosing in that moment. Whereas if you know what you're committed to, you know how you're choosing, and you choose, you know what? No, I've got to actually process and work my day. These are things that I've got to do today to get to my outcome at the end of the day. So preparation, I understand that you may be looking for a more technical aspect, but I go to the psychological and we'll get into some brain stuff here as well, but to prepare, what's your outcome? What are you preparing for is what I want to know.
Yep. Yeah. And I think, when it comes to tactical and kind of the strategic, this is more of a strategic question. So I think you're right on point, because this is a mindset, right? The example of, hey, I'm going to go golf because you haven't prepared and you don't know the outcomes that you want. If you were fully committed and knew, hey, for me to produce the outcomes desired results that I'm trying to achieve, I got to stay focused. I don't have time to go do that right now. Right. And so it's knowing your moments, because, through careful preparation, efforts that you're going to do up front, then you can go off and execute because you have a good plan in place.
Yeah, and let me add there, Shawn, if I can.
Yep.
As I said, I tend to take a more contrarian approach this day and age. I know we've not talked in a while. We've known each other for a long time. Is that we live in a world also, if you look right now, we live in a world where, I don't know the exact numbers anymore, but we have a huge and staggering growing percentage of kids that have ADD.
Mm-hmm.
And we live in a world right now where back in the 70s, we were bombarded with, I think, something like 175 marketing messages a day. Today, that number is up in multiple thousands. There was some research recently that said that a goldfish has a longer attention span than a human being. We're at 7 seconds. A goldfish is at 8.
Wow.
And we look in the world. So part of that, and I don't know the entire answers to that, but part of that is that we live in a world where we have extreme attention deficit this day and age. You've seen that, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So part of that, as we're looking at this, part of that plays into this as well, and the recognition that maybe, my attention span is not what it could be. Or I'm like the dog that sees the squirrel and I'm off chasing something somewhere. So I think awareness of that as well is that our attention spans have been shortened, because to prepare or to get organized, those things require attention as well.
Yep. I wholeheartedly agree. So the second question along the make your sales pop mantra is, what is the best tip, technique, or tool you can suggest to help sales professionals get more organized?
Okay, best tip or tool. So let's talk. Let me I'm making some notes here. Best tip or tool. Number one is, a lot of us, again, we suffer from some form of attention disorder. So let me tell you very quickly what I teach my clients is start your day first with yourself. Meaning and there's a big movement now called mindfulness and becoming mindful on how to change your behaviors and everything. That's along the lines of biofeedback back in the 70s to some degree, or self-hypnosis, which I've taught for many years. First, start your day with yourself. I take time in the morning. I have a meditation room. I go in the room and I spend 30 minutes to an hour in there just by myself. Now, I know that people have kids and families and different things. But what most people do is they have their cell phone by their bed. They roll over, they check their email, and then what happens, Shawn?
Off they go into their workday.
Off they go in the workday. Good friend of mine said to me, and he's actually been, according to Forbes magazine, we've done business together. According to Forbes, he's one of the top 5 business coaches in the U.S. I coach him on sales. He coaches me on business development, and he's also a big marketer. And he says, Jim, if you look at your inbox, we were doing a project together, and I would email him, and he'd never respond back. And he goes, I'm like, where are you? And he goes, if you want me, text me. And I said, well, I'm emailing you. He goes, I don't check email. He goes, if you look at your email inbox is full of other people putting their priorities in front of you.
That's right.
Right? Yeah. And so I learned this several years ago is that I start my day with me.
Yep.
And then what I do is, Jim Rohn said before, America's business philosopher, is never start your day till you finish your day on paper. Now, let me concretize that a little bit. What I do, and we all process information differently. So I'm predominantly visual, which 60% of the population is. So you ask for tools. What I would recommend selling professionals, or what I recommend to my clients, is get your day in front of you somehow. Either carry a planner and work by a 13 or a 12-week planner, get a planner in front of you that you make your business Bible and your planning Bible, or do what I call a Kanban board. Kanban is a Japanese organizational system created back in the 70s, which means visual board. Get a board in front of you. You can Google it, Kanban. Get stickies on it, and actually prioritize your day through essential tasks and work your day through process like that. That's the easiest way to get organized because you've got it in front of you and you know what step 1, step 2, and step 3 is for your day.
That is great. Yeah, so there's a lot there to unpack. I think those are great suggestions. My software company, my coach site, we actually have a goal setting system in there that actually utilizes a Kanban board. So I'm very familiar with that. We manage all of our software projects for our clients there on a Kanban board, project site, and all that stuff. So I'm very familiar with that. And in terms of having a meditation room, really mindfulness. We actually have we run the podcast 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, and each day is a theme. So today's Wisdom Wednesday, and you're sharing your wisdom through this interview.
Oh, cool.
But Mondays are Mindset Monday. And so we handle mindset and stuff like that. And on a future episode, I'm going to actually talk about that particular topic, because I do the same thing. I start each day with myself. I get up at 5. I hit the gym first, because if I don't do it, then I won't do it later. As I get going. And then I come back and go, and I actually have a meditation room as well. And I have a 7-month-old baby.
Yep.
My wife. So, there's no excuses here. I've still kind of sat down and explained how important it is to my wife. She gets it. She's on board with that, type of deal as well. So I think anyone could do that, whether you have a family or you don't, whether you have kids or you don't. It's just back to your commitment.
What you choose
what are
to
your
do,
outcomes, and what are you focused on, right?
It's what you choose to do. And most people actually will give me every excuse in the world as to why they can't do something. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I've worked just like you. I'm in tens of thousands of selling professionals. They'll give me excuses as to why they can't do something, and then they wonder why they're not making the kind of money that they want to make.
Yep.
This is the formula. You look at great achievers in history, and this is not rah motivational stuff. They work on their mind first.
Yep.
And I don't mean even motivational stuff. I mean, really, what makes me tick? What am I on the planet for? What is my purpose? What am I committed to? Am I self-integral?
Yep.
Self-responsibility. These are places that people, every one of you listening now, you want to actually double and triple or quadruple your sales, work on yourself first, and everything else will happen automatically.
Yep. Great advice. And I think you make a good point. They feel overwhelmed. They feel like there's so much to get done. And so therefore that just feels like a rah-rah or fluffy thing that I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just get down to business. And then they get lost in a sea of business, right? And that leads me to my next question. Mm-hmm. The third one, how can a sales professional improve productivity to get more done in less time so they feel less overwhelmed?
Okay. Every one of you listening right now, write this down. If I manage my time by time, I will never have enough time. If I manage my time by time, I will never have enough time. Now, Shawn, when you look at that, that's what every sales professional does, is they manage by time. 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 2:30, 4:35. So, right, thereabouts, they manage by time.
Yep.
What I mean by this is this. Where we must manage ourselves is not by time, but is by commitment. What am I committed to?
That is great.
And then start your day with your 3 essential tasks. Shawn, at the beginning of every year, I set my one-to-one coaching clients up on a 90-day challenge, and a significant one, to bust through their comfort zones and to take them to a higher level. And all of my clients work on 90-day cycles, not in terms of being a client, but in terms of business growth. I had a guy last year in 2016. I've coached him for 7 years now. He's 51 years old, used to be a smoker, and I put everybody on a 90-day plan, and I let them come up with their own plans, obviously. His plan is that he wanted to run 4 miles, he's 51, 4 miles a day for 365 days.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, Mike, I mean, I just gave you 90 days. He's like, no, I'm going to do this. And what he did, I want to share with everyone listening, which rolls in and dovetails with the comment that I just made about managing my commitment. He goes, every day when I get up, he goes, what I do is I look at what I have to do today, and I make my number one priority figuring out where I'm going to run. If my wife and I are going to dinner and I can't run this morning, then guess what? I will run when I get back, but I know where it's going to happen today, and I plan that out at the beginning of every day before I start my day. So for people to be more productive, stop managing by time and manage by what your most essential tasks are that you need to get done that are going to make you money or progress your business.
That is great. That is great. I love that story, and that is impressive. If he's pulling that off,
He did.
Him.
He did, and then
Awesome.
a little brain stuff here is what I had him do. Is I was wondering years back why Weight Watchers was so successful. What they do is they have a daily tracking system, and I'm like, okay, well that makes sense. So he put up a 365-day calendar on his wall, and every day that he ran, he would put an X in the box. When we were talking last November, he's like, dude, I'm looking up on the wall and I see 11 months of X's. There is no way that I'm going to miss a day.
Yeah.
So even tracking our behavior like that keeps us on track because the brain needs tangible things. So that keeps the brain motivated.
Yep. That is outstanding. And speaking of the 90 days, that make your sales pop mantra, we really begin all of our corporate sales coaching programs with our clients with a 90-day plan. We call it a quarterly sales plan. And so we focus in those increments as well. And I'm just a big believer in that. Things change too much, especially in the tech industry that we focus on. For you to put an annual plan together, you got to be able to adapt, but you can't kind of jump ship too soon before 90 days. You don't know whether something is effective or not in terms of your campaigns. You want to see it through at least that far to make sure that you're doing the right thing.
Absolutely. And one small caveat with individuals, though, that are working on their behavior, research has demonstrated it takes 67 days to change a habit and ingrain it unconsciously. So most people think it's 21 days. It's not 21 days. It's 66 to 67 days to ingrain an unconscious behavior. That's why I had people go 90, because I have them go further down the road to cement the behavior in even more.
Yep. That is excellent. And one thing I want to bring up for our audience, Jim, your specific customer is not someone who's, not achieving, right? I mean, when people come to you, they want to improve and achieve on something, but I think you went over, I don't know if you want to share what the average income of your clients are, but we're primarily dealing with this, the audience here on the Sales Integrity Podcast, 6-figure sales reps, right? They might have base salaries just under that, but all in, they're earning 6 figures, multiple 6 figures, even some over $1 million a year in selling technology. How does that mirror and match up with your customer set?
My average one-to-one client coaching right now makes $750,000 a year. I can help people that are struggling in sales. It's not my target market. And the reason why, and I'm going to just be candid, Shawn,
Yep.
I mean this with respect, is that I'll give you the best example. I went to New Orleans, did a presentation about 3 or 4 months ago. Somebody couldn't afford the group coaching, which is affordable, couldn't afford the group. And I said, look, tell you what, let me let you into the coaching. You really need it. It was a woman. She just got divorced. And I said, pay me when you can. Well, the program's been over 6 months and I still haven't gotten a penny from her. Now, that also demonstrates, though, that many people that are what I call stuck, they're stuck for a reason. And they are very difficult many times to get people unstuck. Why? Because they relish many times in being stuck. And I'm just going to be candid. Many times when people are stuck that badly, they become the victim. Poor me, it's not me, it's something else. It's my husband, my wife, my girlfriend, my boyfriend, my dog, whatever. It's something. I generally work best with people that actually are saying, Jim, I'm doing well. Show me how to do better. Sharpen my game. Show me what to do. And then they also do the mental work that I give them to take them to a higher level. So yes, we're very similar in that. I work with achievers.
Yep, which is great. And we call our audience sales achievers. And, contrary to popular belief, when we first get to companies, their executives say, hey, this happens a lot, we only want you to work with our worst reps or the struggling ones. And then I tell them, well, what are you going to tell your top reps? They go, what do you mean? Well, you're going to reward the bottom performers who aren't bringing in any of the revenue, with personal sales coaches that are going to go work on their game, yet they're the ones bringing in the bulk of the revenue, and you're not going to reward them the same way. This needs to be a unified program for the whole company. And what we find is the top reps take to this more than those that are struggling on the bottom. And then in the middle of the pack with the core, those that are struggling for a good reason because they just haven't figured out a systematic approach and how to do all these things that you and I are talking about, they really take to the program. Those that are struggling based on what you said, where they're committed, right? It goes back to commitment. They're committed to struggling, right? They're not committed to making it better. They like playing the victim's role. Well, a program like yours or mine will flush that out, those intentions out pretty quickly.
They'll tell you why your program won't work. And you and I could talk for hours and we could help a lot of people here, and we don't have that kind of time. But a real estate company I worked with, the owner of the company said, Jim, all of my top producers want to be in your coaching, but none of my bottom producers want to be in it. And I tell companies, and they don't like to hear this, they always want you to coach the bottom up.
Yep.
Shawn, you cannot coach the bottom up. That's why they're at the bottom. You can't.
That's right.
Now, I have the exact same model as you. I work with them, like the people that are in the middle that are just, Jim, show me. As long as they've got the desire and they've got the follow through, even if they don't have the commitment yet or the self-integrity, meaning they keep their word to themselves, or self-responsibility, I can teach those things to people who want to learn those things. And the top, they self-motivate, but I give them the skills. We are on the exact same page. But every one of you managers listening now, you cannot coach as much as you try. You cannot coach your bottom up. That's why Jack Welch used to cut, at GE, cut the bottom 10%. Those people will always be at the bottom, and they will tell you why it's someone else's fault that they're at the bottom.
Yep, exactly right. Well said, well said. So let's shift gears now, Jim, and talk social selling, as that seems to be a real hot topic these days. The use of social technology such as LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and others have really taken the selling scene by storm, as you've probably already experienced in what you're doing. So given that, what's one tip you have for the use of social technologies for those that are out there that are our listeners? They're in a complex technical B2B selling niche. So kind of think B2B and business to business. Are these social technologies, are these useful for those selling B2B versus B2C?
That's a big question you asked there.
Yep.
Okay, let me break it down as best I can. First off, when you said social selling, my position is that the more you stop selling, the more money you're going to make. Which we'll cover in just a little bit somewhere, I guess, in our time today, is a good friend of mine. He's known as the godfather of internet marketing. Back in the 2000s, he was literally the biggest person online in internet marketing. His business partner is a guy named Jay Abraham. Do you know the guy? Do you know the name Jay? Okay. Yeah,
absolutely.
This guy that I'm talking about, he and I do business, and his business partner of 15 years is Jay Abraham. His entire approach for online, and he's worked with all kinds of companies, is in this day and age, you hear people saying you got to provide value, right? You got to get content. I tell people, forget that. Look at your email. Every one of you right now, your email is full of people sending you content and reports and things you've not read, and that are clogging up your email, right? I mean, how many PDFs do you have to read? What I tell people is provide extreme solution-oriented value. Provide content that no one else is providing. Now, let's take that back to selling. When you can provide and you can challenge somebody's thinking about what they think, and you can show them problems they didn't even know that existed, now you're actually quote unquote selling, but they're wanting to buy what you have. Whether you're doing a LinkedIn group, and this is what you do, you take a contrarian position, you're doing Facebook post or whatever it is, or even YouTube. When you can challenge somebody's thinking anywhere in social media or the business media, when you can challenge their thinking and get them to think about things that other people have not gotten them to think about, you are technically or automatically selling to them, but it's not actually implied as selling. And they are automatically going to want what you have. Why? Because you're actually helping them see things that they didn't know that existed.
Yeah, that is great. That's exactly where I was hoping you would provide your take from your perspective, right? The mindset, the psychology, the persuasion and influence, and kind of that approach to this social selling question. Because I asked this question of all my guests, and you get different answers, right? And some of them are more tactical, but I was really hoping you would go where you went there, which is great. I think that's extremely beneficial for our audience.
Let me add one line there.
Yep.
Is it the brain? Shawn, how old are you now? Are you 40 or 40-ish, or how old are you?
43, hanging on to 43.
Old man, I tell you. Shawn, are you old enough to remember, and people listening will remember this, are you old enough to remember back in the 90s, the commercials with the guy that he had the book, and he would tell you how to get money from government programs?
Yeah.
Okay, so you remember, right?
Yeah.
You remember what kind of suit he wore?
No, I don't remember that.
You remember that he wore a suit, and it always had like question marks on it. He looked like the Riddler.
Yep.
Right? Remember that? Okay.
Now I do. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. He looked like the Riddler on Batman. And he was running around, right? Okay. Yep. Now tell me some other commercial you remember from the 1990s. I'm waiting.
Good question.
Exactly. That's my point. Is what he did, Shawn, to add to that, this is brain-based, he created high contrast. Okay. Everyone listening, every one of you sales managers or marketers, write this down. This is all brain-based. It's better to be different than it is to be better. It's better to be different than it is to be better. Case in point, Shawn remembers somebody from 20 years ago because he was different. Right, Shawn?
Yep. I'm writing that down. So it's better to be different
than it is to be better.
Be better. That is.
If you look at our culture, we live in a culture that everyone tries to be better than the next.
Mm-hmm.
The better report, the better information. No, it's better to be different because this is called high contrast. And this is one of a brain trigger. And what happens is the brain, when the brain looks at things, decision A and decision B, the brain starts weighing and the brain says, which of these have I figured out? Which of these do I understand? Which of these do I know? If the brain thinks it already knows something, let's say like, for example, case A or product A, the brain will filter that product out. Why? Because the brain goes, I already know about that product. I don't need to waste my brain energy thinking about that product. So, but if you've got two products and one is very dissimilar and very different, the brain will automatically gravitate towards it, just like a cat will, play with things and look for things to play with.
Yeah.
Because the brain is looking for something new, different, and intriguing. If you want to actually capture people's attention, which you had, we talked about attention a little earlier, here's how you do it. Shawn, every 2 years, the clothing detergent Tide, every 2 years they have on their label what? Do you know what they put on their label every 2 years?
Nope.
New and improved.
Improved, yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, what was I washing my clothes in before?
That's right.
I mean, mud?
Yep.
But here's the thing. For all of you, because we're all marketing and we're all selling, that's what we do. And what you want is you want your stuff to be new because the brain loves new. Mm-hmm. So if you can show people a new way to do something, the brain wants different. If you can show people, you know what, there are a lot of people who do what we do, but let me show you how we're different. New, different, and then finally, unique. How can you be the only one who does what you do? Right now, every one of you listening, I teach subconscious persuasion and influence. I'm one of maybe only a dozen in the whole people in the whole country who does this to the degree that I do it. So I have new, different, and unique automatically built into my business. But whatever you sell, widgets or technical things or whatever, the more new, different, and unique you can be, the more you will automatically, boom, just like that, capture the attention of your prospect. And by the way, this is all brain-based and scientifically proven.
Yeah. That is great. I'm glad you brought up, that's really what I call the power of three, those three different things, new, different, unique, because that kind of dovetails nicely into this next question. Social selling, if that's all the rage, and that is kind of the new bright shiny object, new, different, unique, because nobody's really mastered it just yet. Everyone has their unique spin on it, but it's newer, right? Especially for B2B tech sales, it is. How do you make sense of that? B2C, Facebook, there's some tangible ways you're going to get talk about getting attention. I mean, Facebook has more people on it than it feels like there are.
Billion, or like 1.8 billion or something. Yeah, absolutely.
Right? But when it comes to social selling, if that's new, different, and unique, then what's old school or considered old school, and some people are calling it dead, is cold calling, right? So how do you put a new, different, and unique spin on cold calling, or do you? And is cold calling dead in your opinion, Jim?
I'm in the middle on that. I'm usually one place or the other. I'm on the middle, and let me tell you why. I've got a friend of Ron White, the memory expert. You know Ron White, or no?
Ron. Yep.
Ron White constantly touts that he's the old-fashioned cold caller. Now, Ron, if you're listening to this later, we can have this conversation. I think it's old school, but you know what? It builds his business, and Ron is always speaking somewhere. Ron literally is traveling 45 weeks of the year somewhere in the world speaking, and he does it through cold calling. As far as is it outdated? Shawn, I don't know, but this is what I know, and I know that we're all pretty much the same, even if we don't know that we're the same, is that I don't answer my voicemail. When people call me, I will look and see if I know them, but it might take me days to even get to it. I don't pick up my phone, mainly because I'm on the phone all day long with clients and coaching and training. If you want my attention, text me. Is cold calling dead? I don't know, but when I look at my own behavior, I don't respond to it at all.
Yeah,
and I would think I don't. What about you? Do you?
Yeah, well, actually, I'll give you my spin real quick. But before I forget, you mentioned text you. I recently posted an article out there and in the social media stratosphere about, is texting appropriate, from a sales perspective. So what if someone knows that they're listening to this and they want to sell Jim Fortin, right? And they say, I'm not going to cold call and leave a voicemail. He said, text them. Somehow they got your cell phone number. Is it appropriate for someone just to send you a cold text?
I don't enjoy that either, and I get that. And some jerk took my number and sold it last year to a list, and yeah, exactly. So I get on my cell, I get like 10 to 15 calls and texts a day. Shawn, this goes back to, and I'm going to contradict myself here a little bit, because people think that you have to build relationships to get a sale, and that's not entirely true. If I need brain surgery, I don't need a relationship with my brain surgeon. I just want to know he's the best one out there. Okay.
Yep.
So as we're looking at this, we don't buy. As a matter of fact, we have been conditioned to be resistant to sales and marketing messages. We get bombarded so much in our culture that unconsciously, by the way, people listening, I use unconscious and subconscious interchangeably. But unconsciously, the second we think somebody's trying to sell us, that bat shield goes right up, And we're like the bat repellent spray. Yep. We're just automatically resistant. But if somebody I'm just going to be candid, go back to Virginia Cook. This is old school, but it's real. If I think somebody's genuinely trying to help me and they're seriously interested in helping me, I will stop and listen. But if I think somebody's just trying to sell me something, I don't care what it is, I automatically just shut them down. And that's literally nanosecond, unconsciously responsive. I do not want to be sold something because you're trying to sell me something.
Yeah. So to answer your question directly, I do believe that cold calling, the way it used to be done, is not effective. It's just
agreed
now. And first of all, it needs to be part of a healthy mix, a lead generation mix. So in conjunction with other methods of outreach and communication, I think it's effective. Also, if your intention is to help someone, just like you just said, kind of building upon that last point, and your messaging reflects that, although you may not reply to my voicemail, now you might reply to mine because we know each other, but let's say I was cold calling you. Right. And I left you a voicemail and you didn't know me from Adam, but that's your first introduction to me. If I'm professional, succinct, to the point, and it is based on value, something that you talked about that is new, unique, different, and you were happen to be thinking about that topic, or maybe you weren't and you're like, maybe I should be, you might not reply to my first voicemail. But if I apply professional persistence and spread out over time, mix that with also sending you an email, maybe even sending you an email, other methods where you're visible online, and you say, you know what, I like this Shawn guy. He hasn't been too aggressive. He's over time reached out to me. He has a unique perspective and point of view. When I'm ready to engage with someone to discuss this possible, overcoming a challenge, issue, or goal, he's one guy I might reach out to. And so it's not something that it can be your only strategy. It can't purely be cold. You got to research, you got to understand, you got to target the right audience. So there's a whole show we could do on that without getting too detailed with it. But it does, in my opinion, if you remove that, and all you're doing is, and this is where I get a little bit antsy when I hear just these social media gurus that have popped up out of nowhere recently say, cold calling's dead. That's all you need to do is social selling. Just sit back and wait and put out all this great content. Like you
Shawn, that's their marketing though.
Yeah. Yeah.
What they're doing is they're selling to people taking a contrarian position.
Yep. That's a good point. That is their marketing. But at the end of that rainbow is going to be disappointment, in my opinion, for sales professionals, because if you're not taking control of your own success, that relies on sitting back and waiting versus being assertive and doing the outreach and mixing that in. It needs to be a mix of all that, because when you do outreach and you use calling and you use emailing and in-mailing and other methods just to reach out and be proactive, and you get a hold of someone, you bet your bottom dollar they're going to go to Google you, they're going to go to LinkedIn, and you need to be a real person that adds value, that has some good value content out there. So you still need to do the things they're saying, but it just can't be the only thing you're doing. Otherwise, you're going to be very disappointed.
Correct. 2 quick points also. We only 7% of communication is words. So anytime you call somebody and you leave a voicemail, 7% is words. 93%, which you can't use this on the phone, all of it, but 93% is body language when you're talking to people. Back in 2004, when I watched George Bush, John Kerry debates, if you turned off the volume and you watched John Kerry and George Bush, John Kerry's very cerebral and very, Ivy League. And George Bush is a dude you want to have a beer with. And the thing is this, you turn off the volume, you stop listening to the words, and you watch the body language. Who do you like more? When you cold call people, they're reading your tone, your timbre, and your breathing. The right-hand side of the brain is listening to you, even though the left-hand side of the brain is listening to your words. The right-hand side of the brain is saying their tone, their timbre. Do I trust this person, and how do I feel about them? So those things come into effect. Shawn, I didn't want to prolong this, but I have to share this with you. One of my clients out in LA asked me to come sit down with one of their, it's called an inside sales agent, an ISA. And they said his numbers aren't where they need to be. Can you see what's going on? Flew out to LA. I sat down and I sat with him for 1 hour, and I already knew what was happening. He was not hitting his numbers. Why? Because he was an amazing cold caller, but when he would smile and dial, he would go in the cold call voice. I mean, it was just a rhythm and a pattern. So the person on the other end of the phone, and this guy, he was really good, but the person on the other end of the phone, what they're reading subconsciously is this person isn't connecting with me as a human being. This person is somebody cold calling me. Why? Because they went into that voice tone, that rhythm, and that pattern. Yeah. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And that's also what I teach, which is, on social media, on LinkedIn, especially for our niche of the sales world and the B2B tech sales space, look like someone they want to do business with. And when you're leaving a voicemail, sound like someone, or when you're on the phone in a live discussion, sound like someone that they want to interact with and have a discussion with, right? So that takes a lot of preparation. It takes, making sure that you're comfortable with it before. If you're uncomfortable, they're gonna
know it.
Feel uncomfortable.
They're gonna read it unconsciously because they're reading your breathing and how fast you talk or how slow you talk. Also, extensive research done. People know whether or not, hey, sales folks, listen up. This is research by Dr. Robert Cialdini. People know by listening to you and watching the unconscious mind's taking in information, they know if you're authentic or not.
Yeah.
They know it unconsciously. That's why people will say, I really like what you had to say, but I don't know. We're just going to think about it. We need to look around a little bit. Why? Because they unconsciously know that there's something amiss or something not right.
Yep. Yep. And to put a bow on that cold calling topic, and then we'll move forward here. Yep. It's really, if you're uncomfortable with cold calling, it's because you're unwilling to take the time to prepare, a whole process involved to make yourself sound like someone that they're going to want to interact with, right? You're just simply not prepared in that space. And if you're not prepared, you're going to be uncomfortable, then you shouldn't employ that as one of your tactics or techniques for lead generation. Right?
We could talk forever. Let me add one comment on my side, and I'll be quiet about this topic. But people many times say to me, Jim, I want more confidence. I hear that all the time. No, you don't. See, competence leads to confidence. Mm-hmm. The more competent you are at something, confidence comes naturally. And this is something, Shawn, you and I'll be on the same page. Man, I do my best to be the best at what I do. And I work hard to be really, really good at what I do. And I prepare. But you know what most selling professionals won't do is they won't take the time to prepare.
Yep. That's what we work on with every single individual and every single company that we go in on. Exactly that. We start with that, make your sales pop, and that starts with preparation. Exactly right. And it's interesting you bring up, all you're doing is reaffirming a point I made on the last several podcasts, which is competence leads to confidence. And customers want to deal with both competent and confident sales professionals.
Well, we unconsciously, who says, you know what? Even if we don't even have confidence ourselves, we never say, well, I think I'm going to hire that guy because his confidence is a little shaky, but I just think I'm not. No. Even if we don't have confidence ourselves, if we're selling our house or B2B sales or a corporate, it's a corporate account or whatever, we want to deal with people that we believe are confident people. And if we in any way deem they're not confident, that's an automatic turnoff. And that's just what it is, even if they know what they're talking about.
Yeah. I agree. Well, Jim, you've been very generous with your time today. I really appreciate it, but we're nearing the end of our time together today. So that means one thing on the Sales Integrity Podcast here, Jim. It's time for the sales cycle. Now, the sales cycle is not only a process that all sales professionals have to manage, of course, but it's also the name of our lightning round, where I ask questions in rapid fire format and look for quick answers from our guests.
Got it. Okay.
So to make it fun, I time the sales cycle. Obviously, all sales professionals want to complete a sales cycle as fast as possible, right? That means more success, more income, and more customers that they can help sooner. So we're going to time this and make it fun. There's going to be 7 specific questions I ask. And currently, our previous guest, Jeff Bishop, set the benchmark with a 4-minute and 15-second sales cycle. So that's the time to beat.
Okay.
All right. Now, keep one thing in mind, and you've done a great job of expounding and adding value here. This you're trying to be expedient and succinct. However, you want to make sure you're adding value. So kind of balancing those two. So just keep that in mind as you answer that. Okay. So let me get my trusty little timer ready here, and we're going to go ahead and start the timer, and I'll start with the first of 7 questions. So you ready?
Yep. Let's go.
All right. let's get it started. You are now on the clock. So question number 1, name a specific technology or tool you use for identifying and researching target market prospects.
Okay, because I'm B2C. Let me just put it this way: let me change your languaging there. Identifying and researching target prospects. What I do is I use YouTube and actually hit them right between the eyes and get their attention, and actually start selling to their pain and things that they want. And I let them identify me as somebody that they want to actually follow instead of me actually trying to attract them.
That's excellent. Question number 2, what is the best way to initially get the attention of and connect with your target market prospects? And you may have just mentioned it.
We covered that. New, unique, and different. Boom. All brain proven.
1 and 2 are the same. So question number 3, what method do you use to consistently stay top of mind if your prospects aren't ready to buy just yet?
I'm different than everyone else. What I teach my prospects and clients is how to plant hypnotic suggestions, which are scientifically proven into the mind of my prospect. And I can plant a post-hypnotic suggestion saying, even that you folks listening to this later, you're going to realize how valuable this is. And later when you're listening to this, you're going to want to come back and listen over and over because of the takeaways you're going to get from it.
Outstanding. Question number 4, what sales process methodology do you use to manage opportunities through your sales cycle or sales pipeline?
For me, I'm going to go back. The simple thing is process. Everything has to always be broken down the process. And I know when I manage me personally as an individual, the rest of the process works. I use Kanban.
Okay, great. Coming down the home stretch here. 3 more questions. Question 5, how do you define the concept of closing a sale?
Shawn, what's ABC stand for?
Always be closing.
Right, that's 1950s. What I tell people now is ABL, always be leading. When you get into the mind of your prospect, you can lead them exactly where you want them to go. No one wants to be closed, but everyone wants to be led.
That's great. Question number 6, how do you know when it's time to close a sale for any given deal?
The second I shake their hand and I know that they're a good fit for my product or service.
Awesome. And last question, what is your best advice for sales achievers to improve their closing ratio?
Improve yourself.
All right. That's going to be tough to beat. 2 minutes and 11 seconds. I think you cut it in half. You were very succinct. That was awesome. I think it was awesome because you provided a lot of good detail throughout the podcast, and I think that there's a ton of takeaways. I loved your hypnotic suggestion. What did you call it? Hypnotic future?
Post-hypnotic suggestion. For example, let me give them just 10 seconds.
Sure.
You know, Shawn, later today as you're driving around town or later today as you're going to lunch, which you're going to do, right?
Yep.
You're going to think back to this podcast and you're going to think, dang, that was a really good really great podcast with a lot of great takeaways. Notice how you're doing something later, and I tell you what you're going to think when you're doing it later by planting that suggestion.
That is great. Yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it. So that's another good golden nugget here. Good takeaway right at the end of the podcast. I really appreciate that. So congrats on having the fastest sales cycle. We'll benchmark that. Your name will be on future podcasts. I have a feeling for quite some time, unless somebody's more succinct than that. So it's a great job. So let's wrap up the show with your number 1 piece of advice for complex technical B2B sellers and with how people can best connect with you.
Okay, 2 things. I may go a little different than what you're going to do, but Shawn, I'm going to take it back. Is complex B2B sales is not complex B2B sales. Even though that's what it is, that's what it's not. We are one human being sitting on the other side of the table selling to somebody else. When you sell to that person's pain, even though it might be airplane parts or whatever, or software, whatever, that person has an emotional stake in their business and is always trying to go to a higher level or eliminate pain. My approach on this and what I coach on is connect with that human being and connect to their particular wants, desires, and needs, because they will actually attribute those back to their business. Does that make sense? That
makes perfect sense.
Sell to the person, not the company, not the product. Sell to the human being.
Yep.
Always put people in pain as well, because pain is what moves people. Guys, a little nugget there. Shawn, when you're watching commercials, if you don't use Crest, what's going to happen?
You're not going to have white teeth.
You're going to get gingivitis. Everything. Pain is hardwired in the brain. The more you actually engage people's pain, the more they're going to move from pain to pleasure. And where people can find me, I've got hundreds of videos online teaching all of this at the salespsychologyacademy.com. Sales Psychology Academy, or you can reach me personally at jim@mindauthority.com.
Great. Well, thank you for your time today, Jim. I really, really appreciate it. I know it's going to be very, very valuable for all of our listeners out there. And thank you to all the sales achievers out there who took the time to listen to today's interview. I appreciate it and look forward to everyone applying some of the sales wisdom ideas. And even if you apply just one that Jim provided, I think that's going to really move the needle for your sales success and elevate your sales game. So I really appreciate everyone's time. And now let's wrap up today's episode with a few quick reminders. First, we recently launched 2 new B2B tech sales professional groups, one on LinkedIn and one on Facebook. Just search for B2B tech sales professionals on either LinkedIn or Facebook, or both if you want to join both groups, and join the conversation with your peers there. Second, if you haven't already subscribed to our free 7-day video email course titled 7 Steps to Master the Game of Complex Technical Selling, then you can do so by visiting mastercomplexselling.com. Again, that's mastercomplexselling.com, or you can text the word SI course, so as in sales integrity, SI course, all one word with no spacing in between. If you send it with a space between SI and course, you'll receive an error message back. So text the word SI course to the number 44222. After subscribing, we will send you your first lesson via email right away on day 1, and then one for the next 6 days. Third, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or SoundCloud. Just search for the Sales Integrity Podcast with Shawn Pickett, and it should pop up and allow you to subscribe on one of those 2 channels. After you subscribe, please provide a quick 5-star rating and simple 1 to 2 sentence review to help others find the show. To provide a review on iTunes isn't as simple as you think. You can't do so directly within the podcast. What you have to do is actually click on the search icon, then type in Sales Integrity, and you will see my podcast there. Now, I'm referring to the purple podcast icon. When you click on that on your iPhone, brings up the main podcast center. Down below, you'll see the search icon. So click on that, type in Sales Integrity, and you'll see the podcast there. Click on the podcast. In it, you'll see the reviews tab in the middle there. Just click on that. And once there, you could provide a 5-star rating and simple 1 or 2 sentence review. Now, since iTunes prioritizes shows with the most ratings and reviews higher than those that have just a few of them, this will dramatically help the show be found by more people. So I greatly appreciate it. And finally, please share the podcast with your colleagues and friends who would find it relevant. You can do so by going to salesintegrity.com and click on the Sales Integrity Podcast menu link at the top of the page. All of the podcasts are there, and it provides you a way to click a button and share any episode, whether via email directly to individuals, or there's buttons there to share it on the various social media sites, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, etc. So I would greatly appreciate it if you spread the word about the show on social media to help grow it. And finally, that'll do it for today's episode. Now go out there in the sales world today and help your prospects and customers buy what they want, what they need, and what benefits them. And most importantly, go out there and make it a great day.